Hello, hello. Happy marvelous Monday, everybody. I hope that you are well. Listen, I'm so excited that you are joining me today. If you're watching a replay, thank you so much. I am Karissa Spann, the abundantly blessed landlord and tenant expert, and today's segment is all about the truth about security deposits. If this is your first time tuning in, thank you. Welcome. Let me silence my phone. I do apologize about that. If you have stumbled across my page, I'm live each and every week on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Thank you so much. This is what I do. I share information to help landlords as well as tenants to positively improve the entire rental community. And today's discussion is centered around security deposits. Why? Because I've had some conversations with tenants as well as landlords about the security deposit. And the question is, Karissa, how much am I supposed to charge? How much is too much? And there are a lot of questions as well as uncertainty about the security deposit. And today I'm going to tackle all of that. But before I do, let me share a disclaimer. I am not an attorney. The information that I share today is not legal advice. If you do have comments, questions, or concerns, I invite you to drop it in the comment section and I will respond to them accordingly. But again, the information that I share, like I said, it's not legal advice, but I am providing the industry's best tips and practices. And so I'm going to answer the question, how much is too much? I'm going to answer the question, what can the security deposit be used for? As a matter of fact, what is a security deposit? Some people have questions about that. They believe that, I've had some tenants who say that they believe the security deposit is to make sure that the rental property that they're living in is secure and it provides safety. Well, let me just go through all of those questions, answer all of that, get that in the way. I promise not to hold you long, but I'm going to hold you long enough just to share this information. I do ask that if you find this information helpful or of value to like, tag, and share it with someone else who can also benefit from this information. Is that all right? Okay, so let me get into it because I do have quite a bit to share today. And I always want to make sure that I'm providing information as well as answering questions. So those of you who are in the rental community and you have questions about the various subject matters that I share each and every Monday, I'm live 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So again, if you have questions, comments, remarks, or observations, please drop it in the comment section and I will respond to all of your questions today while I'm live and online. Now, of course, if you have a question, if I'm not online, I'm going to give you my email address so that you can contact me and I will definitely follow with you. So let me share my email address as I am preparing to go into a deeper conversation. So that is my email address at the bottom of the screen there. So today's topic is the truth about security deposit. What is it? What can a landlord do with the security deposit? Is it a requirement for tenants to pay it? How much is too much? And what is the time frame if a security deposit is paid, the time frame for it to be returned to tenants? All right. I'm going to tackle all of that on today. So first and foremost, I want to just let you all know that I typically will start out with information for landlords first. But today I'm going to get into this discussion focusing on tenants first. Why? Because I've had more tenants who are concerned about their security deposit. And one of the things that I always tell tenants is this: as a renter, you do have rights. And just depending on where you live, just depending on the jurisdiction, that will provide guidance or stipulation as to how much a landlord can collect legally, because there are limitations, there are restrictions on how much a landlord can receive for the security deposit. But before I get into the limitations and what's too much, let me just share with you what a security deposit is, because I know that some people who have never rented, maybe there is some uncertainty about what a security deposit is, as well as those who have rented before. Like I said, there was a young lady who thought that the security deposit provides security and safety for where she lives. And that is, in fact, not what the security deposit is for. All right. A security deposit is money that's paid by the tenant or on behalf of a tenant to the landlord for the place they're going to be living in. Usually the security deposit is paid before a tenant moves in. Now, I said that the security deposit is paid by the tenant or on behalf of the tenant. And sometimes a tenant can find an organization, a nonprofit, a church, family, friends, or loved one who may pay the security deposit for that tenant. So the security deposit may not directly come from the tenant, but it can be paid on their behalf. Now, when it comes to the security deposit, here is what I want you to know as a tenant, that although this money is paid to your landlord, it is for a specific purpose. It does have functionality of that security deposit that's paid either by you, from you, or on your behalf. Okay, I'm going to get into all of that. I'm going to break it down, but I just wanted to just define what the security deposit is. Okay, so we know that it's money that's paid to the landlord. Now, some landlords will require a cashier's check, a personal check, or money order. Not many landlords, not too many, but some do ask that you pay the security deposit in cash. Now, I don't have a recommendation either way. I just simply will say this: whatever form of payment the security deposit is paid by or paid in, please make sure that you get a receipt. Now, it is not my business practice to receive a security deposit in cash. I do know that some people will request a security deposit in cash. And if a landlord is asking you as a tenant to pay the security deposit in cash only, make sure that you get a receipt, because you want to be able to have some sort of legal documentation showing that you've paid your money. Okay? Always get a receipt. As a matter of fact, let me take it a step further. Whatever method, but especially cash. Cashier's check, money order, personal check, credit card even. There are lots of ways for a landlord to receive the payment. At the end of the day, just make sure that as a tenant that you have some sort of documentation to show that the money has been paid. All right. I'm going to explain why that is so important in a little bit. But now here's the thing. I've had landlords who said, Karissa, I only request security deposits to be paid by the tenant in the form of cash. Now, I won't get into the reason why they always only require cash, but I will say this. In some jurisdictions, paying by cash is not acceptable. Some states, some cities have requirements on the way payment can be made. So first and foremost, know and understand what the laws are and what can and cannot be done. Now, if as a tenant you live in a jurisdiction and the landlord cannot request the security deposit by way of cash, and if the landlord is asking for it, you can pay it in another form. Okay, so I mentioned cashier's check, money order, personal check. Just ask those questions like, what are some of the other options that I'm able to pay the security deposit? Because that will definitely make a huge difference. And you want to make sure, like I said, that you get that receipt. All right, so now let me share some tips for you as a tenant, because I want you to know and understand that, again, that you do have rights. Okay, so as a tenant, when it comes to the security deposit, here's the truth. The security deposit can be used for various things. Okay, but it cannot substitute your monthly rent. All right. The security deposit usually serves as a means to maybe fix or replace something in the rental property, if it's damaged, um, cleaning, unpaid rent, but usually at the end of that lease term. The security deposit really doesn't come into play while you are in your current lease. So maybe let's say you're living in your rental property and you have an emergency, you don't have the money to pay your rent. So you ask your landlord if you could substitute that rent payment for that month out of or from the security deposit. That is not what the security deposit is for. Okay. But I know that sometimes that does happen. But now here are some tips I want you to know and understand as a tenant. So let me share the first one. Before you move into a rental property, you should always inspect it thoroughly. Here's why that's important. If, as a tenant, you move into a rental property, and I do know people who have just decided to move into a property because maybe they had a situation, there was some sort of urgency, they did not inspect it, and maybe they didn't know that they could have inspected the property. Please make sure that you inspect the property thoroughly before you move in, because if you move in without thoroughly inspecting that property, you run the risk of not knowing what's wrong before you move in, right? Let's say you move in, then all of a sudden you realize that a door is hanging off the hinge in one of the closets. So you moved in, you didn't do a thorough move-in inspection. You realize that the door is hanging off the hinge. You contact the landlord. The landlord said, well, hey, there was nothing wrong with the door. The door was fully functional. It was operable when you moved in. So you must have damaged the door. So when you move in without conducting the inspections, you do run the risk of accepting the property as is and potentially getting yourself in a situation where if anything is wrong, the landlord could possibly hold you accountable for whatever is not right. So before you move in, before you move any furniture in, before you hang a picture on the wall, before you do anything, carefully do a thorough inspection of that rental property. You always want to document any existing damage, because if not, when you move out, that landlord can hold you responsible, right? So that includes pictures, that include videos as well. Usually, one of the things that I always recommend, and here's my practice, whenever a tenant moves into a rental property, I will always do a move-in inspection with that tenant. Now, I know that all housing providers do not do that, but that is the best practice. Some housing providers or landlords will allow you as a tenant to move in, and they'll say, well, I'm going to give you the inspection checklist. If you find anything wrong, just let me know and we'll come back and take care of it. Sometimes landlords are honest and will do the right thing. Some landlords are not. So you always want to document the existing condition, any existing damage to that rental property with the landlord. You want to make sure that you get a copy of that inspection checklist. That means you should sign it, as well as that landlord should also sign that move-in inspection. But now that doesn't happen, they just give you the checklist, or maybe you don't have a checklist at all. Go ahead and document the condition, again, with pictures and videos. Share that with the landlord, okay, so that you're not held liable for that when you move out. And that's going to be so important. Now, here is another tip I want to share with tenants. After you have moved in that rental property, and again, I'm sharing the truth about security deposits, you want to maintain that rental property to the best of your ability. Why? Because when you take good care of the rental property, you reduce the risk of the landlord saying they're not going to give you that money back that you've paid, or maybe someone has paid on your behalf. So with maintaining that rental property, if anything happens, repairs are needed, go ahead and contact the landlord right away. Let your landlord know what needs to be taken care of maintenance-wise, so that those things are not held against you when you move out, because it could happen. So let's say you are living in that rental property and something happened and you never told the landlord because you just didn't think about it. right? So let's say it's a house and the kitchen sink overflowed. There was a leak, or maybe there's a pipe leak. So under the kitchen cabinet, a pipe is leaking. It kept dripping, 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 dripping to the point where underneath the cabinet just kind of just got real messed up from water. So you had extensive water damage. And as a result, water continued to leak. It went downstairs. And so there was a lot of water damage to the cabinet, to the walls, to the ceiling, to the floor, and the landlord now wants to hold you accountable because of this water damage. Well, if you do not report issues and it go unrepaired, the damage, the landlord could potentially hold you accountable for that. So, and I know that many cases, landlords may not be coming out to do inspections, right? But then there are also situations where, as a tenant, you just may not know to report it because, like I said, you just believe, maybe you believe the landlord should know, maybe the landlord should have been there to do an inspection, right? I see a lot of things happening in the rental community, which is why I like to have these conversations on Monday. Maintaining that rental property to the best of your ability doesn't always mean that you have to be responsible for repairs. What I am saying is that when you see something, say something so that the landlord can take care of it, not hold you accountable when you move out, because if there's some sort of damage, that landlord can withhold all or part of your security deposit. So make sure that you keep regular um, records of that property when things are wrong, when you've reported to the landlord, because um, like I said, those damages could be deducted from your security deposit. So I do want you to know and understand that. Now, here's another tip I want you to know and understand as a tenant. Now, if you're a landlord, hold on because I have some information for you. Now, here's a third tip for you as a tenant. Please make sure that when you move out that you follow the move out procedures. Usually in a rental lease agreement, it should, it may not always, but it should stipulate the terms of the move out process, what you should do. Usually a move out inspection should take place. Now, here's what I like to tell my tenants. When a tenant tells me, hey, Karissa, I'm going to vacate the property in 30, 60, 90 days, what have you, I'll say, hey, thank you so much for being a great tenant. Sorry to see you leave. By the way, let's go ahead and schedule that move out inspection, especially if you are looking to get your security deposit back. Please set up a date after you have moved everything completely out and after you've cleaned that rental property, because if not, we could use those things that you don't do and deduct it from your security deposit. So we want to make sure that we give you all of your security deposit back. I like to go above and beyond to explain it and educate my tenants. That's just me. Now, everybody doesn't do that, okay? Which is why we're having this segment today about security deposit, the truth about security deposit. But follow that move out procedure. Find out from your landlord what is required of you. Do you have to do the move out inspection together, or is that something that you do and that the landlord will follow up with you? You want to find out that process, and then also understand that when you move out, what is the next step? Will you get your security deposit back? And if so, how much? Also, what is the timeline? You want to know that process. So ask those questions. When you're preparing to move out, you want to follow those procedures carefully. You want to clean the place thoroughly. You want to make sure that no repairs or damage to the property has taken place or is needed. And you want to make sure that, like I said, you remove all of your personal belongings, because if not, if the landlord has to pay a contractor to remove those things. So let's say you left some furniture behind, or maybe you were planning to clean up and you just didn't get a chance to go back because you had so much to do. I get it. Things happen and life just be lifing, right? So you don't get the opportunity, you don't get the chance to go back to the rental property to clean up, to get those bulk items. Maybe you left a mattress or chair or dresser or something. Maybe you left some uh, um, pots and pans, or, just like I said, your personal belongings, right? And if a landlord has to pay out of pocket to remove those things, then legally, yes, they can charge you for that because it wasn't in that condition when you move in. And so here's what I like to tell my tenants. When you move out, do a complete walkthrough. Before we do a move out inspection together, do a complete walkthrough. Pull open every door, every drawer. Hey, Joe, thank you so much for tuning in. Open the cabinets, look in the refrigerator, look in the freezer, look in the stove. If there's a dishwasher, open that up. Check every room, check wall to wall, door to door, floor to floor. Check the entire rental property to make sure that you have left absolutely nothing behind. Because if you do, then the landlord may have grounds to deduct from that security deposit. And I know that that's something that a lot of tenants do not want to happen. And obviously, you want to get all of your money back, right? You've paid your security deposit and you want to get all of that security deposit back. So I do have some things that tenants should not do. But before I do that, let me share some tips for landlords. And then I'm going to get into the things that should not be done, but is obviously being done, which is why we're having this conversation. So my tips for landlords are really simple. Some of you may already know this, but for those of you who have not, maybe you're a new landlord or you're thinking about becoming a landlord, here's what I do want you to know. You should always document the property's condition. Just as I've shared tips for tenants, I'm sharing this tip with you. When you document the condition, I always strongly recommend that you do that together. Do that move-in inspection with the tenant. But if not, make sure that you understand the condition of that rental property before the tenant moves in. Here's why that's important. I had a young lady who moved into a rental property. After she moved in, she said, Karissa, my blinds are about to fall off the window, and she made a big, huge deal about the blinds. Now, I knew that it was no way humanly possible that she moved into the rental property with the blinds about to fall. Number one, because we replaced the blinds, they were brand new, and because I'm extremely thorough and I train my team to do moving inspections like they're going through that rental property with a fine-tooth comb. So not only did we have pictures, but we have videos of every part of that rental property. So in any event, sent the team members out to take an assessment of the windows, all the windows and all the blinds, because I want to make sure that we're going above and beyond, right? So if a tenant has a concern or complaint, the first thing that I'm going to do is nip it in the bud. If it's something that needs to be done, then obviously we're going to take care of it. So in any event, so went to the rental property, and the blinds were not about to fall, but to our surprise, they were bent. They were damaged. So essentially, it looks like what may have happened is that the tenant went to open the window, and instead of pulling the blinds up to prevent the damage, she just kind of went between the blinds and lift the window up. And so the blinds, the mini blinds, they were kind of bent, right? And so we just explained to her that before you open the window, pull the blinds up so that the blinds are not damaged. I did let her know that we're not charging her for that, but just take some precaution the next time, open the blinds completely up. But she had not been in that property for a long time. She had just signed a lease and moved in. Now, can you imagine if I was someone who didn't know this, right? And I just allowed the tenant to move in without documenting the condition? There would have been no way I could stand on my word and know with 100% surety that there was absolutely nothing wrong. I know that as a landlord, sometimes things happen and you may not think to do a full inspection. But it's so important, because if a tenant moves in and they report that something is wrong, how can you confirm or deny that that was a pre-existing condition before they took possession of that rental property? So please make sure that you document the property's condition. You should always use an inspection checklist. You should always, as a landlord, be taking pictures. Take videos of the rental property and keep it. Now, for those of you who own or manage a lot of rental doors, then sometimes videos may not be an option. But then again, technology does allow you to do those things and store it electronically. But nonetheless, you definitely want to make sure that you are getting good pictures of every room, every wall, every door, all the appliances. Document, document, document. Because here's why: documentation beats conversation any day. And if you're documenting that property's condition, then you already know when the tenant has a concern that maybe it was or maybe it wasn't, right? Document the property. That way you'll understand and know whether or not it's tenant's damage, tenant's responsibility, or yours. So here's my second tip for landlords. Very early and upfront, set clear expectations. Let tenants know what they can expect from you while they are living in that rental property. Clearly outline the terms of that rental lease agreement. Make sure that you set, if there are rules or regulations in place, sometimes there may be house rules. Always include the condition. Make sure that it's clear. Also, let the tenant know how you're going to keep the security deposit, how you're going to retain it, the reasons you could retain it, rather. You want to be very clear and upfront before time escapes you. Make sure that the tenant understands their responsibility. Make sure that they understand the consequences of violating that rental lease agreement, because the lease is a legally binding document. And so if the tenant is not clear, if you're not helping tenants to understand their role and their responsibility, then sometimes it's a lot harder to hold them accountable. And especially if it's not spelled out in writing. I always like to say, put it in writing. You cannot enforce something that does not exist. So please have clear expectations and make sure that it is definitely in your lease. And here's a third tip for landlords on today. We're talking about the truth about the security deposit. Follow legal requirements. I know that sometimes some landlords will do whatever they desire to do because they own the property. Well, let me just tell you this. There are laws in place that stipulate and govern how you must run your rental property business. I like to say it this way: if you treat your business like a business, it's going to pay you like a business. If you treat it like a hobby, it's going to pay you like a hobby. Please do not run a rental property business wearing your emotions and your feelings on your sleeve. It is a business. People don't care about how you feel. People don't care that you're in your feelings because something has gone wrong at the rental property. And I promise that something will go wrong at some point in time. I've been doing this for well over 20 plus years. A pipe will leak, something will break, a toilet will stop up, the kitchen sink will back up, something will happen, okay? And that's not the time to get into your feelings, but it's the time to put on your professional hat and just make sure that you get things done, making sure that you document the condition of that rental property. But understanding what the requirements are, the legal requirements, that is make that your number one priority. Know what you can and cannot do, because what you don't know can and will hurt you, okay? Landlords cannot just do what they want because they own the property, unfortunately, okay? So be aware and know, as well as comply with laws, local laws, state laws, federal laws, especially for those of you who have rental property and you have some sort of housing participant in any of these housing programs. You want to understand all aspects of the laws pertaining to that rental, okay? Because at the end of the day, it is an asset. The property is an asset, and you want to make sure that you are covering your asset, okay? So know what the laws are. Know how much you can charge. So essentially, you want to make sure that you're not charging too much. Some landlords have made the mistake by charging way too much money. In some jurisdictions, a landlord can charge 1 month rent, 2 months rent. In some places, it's up to 3 times the rental amount for the security deposit. Now, I've had questions by tenants. They say, well, Karissa, this landlord is charging almost 3 times the rent amount. Is that legal? Because that just seems like too much. Well, if it's in a jurisdiction where it is allowable, then unfortunately, if the law allow that landlord to charge that amount, then by all means they can, and they are. But in other areas, landlords are charging way too much, and it's far exceeding the limit. And when that happens, as a landlord, I want you to understand that you can definitely get yourself in trouble. If you're, for instance, if you're charging tenants more money, so let's say you have a tenant who comes to you, a female comes to you, she has, let's say, a 580 credit score. Okay, that's about an average range. Could be higher, but let's just use 580. So she has a 580 credit score. You tell her that the security deposit is the equivalency of 2 months' rent. Then a male comes, he also has a 580 credit score. You tell him that his security deposit is the equivalency of 1 month rent. That is against the law to charge different people different ranges of the security deposit. So please make sure that you understand the laws. You don't want to be found guilty of discriminating. Now, I know that some people are questioning, well, Karissa, how is that discriminating? Well, there are laws in place that governs how you must do business. And so please make sure that you are double checking with the local county or the state to find out what is the requirement for the security deposit. Be consistent, be fair across the board. Also, you want to explain the timeline. When a tenant is going to move out, you need to know and understand how much time do you have to return the security deposit. And if you are deducting any of the security deposit for any reason, you should always provide that information in writing. So the tenant should know, based off of the move out inspection that's completed, that the security deposit may be, maybe it's not being returned because there's damage to the wall, there are holes in the wall, there's damage to the floor, right? You want to document that. You want to document it not just with a letter or an email, but you also want to follow with pictures. You want to follow with invoices, because all of that will show proof why you are deducting from the security deposit. A lot of jurisdictions make it a requirement to document those things and to also provide the timeline by which the tenant can expect for them to get their money back. All right, so those are my 3 tips for landlords. I started out with tenants first, but now here are some things that landlords absolutely cannot do. All right, I'm gonna start with the landlords first. You cannot, as a landlord, use the security deposit for normal wear and tear items. So let's say that there's carpet in the rental property, right? And it's a little worn. It's a little worn. It's not damaged, but maybe in some areas it's a little bit darker, right? It didn't look like that when a tenant first moved in. That's considered normal wear and tear. You cannot charge a tenant anything of their security deposit for normal wear and tear. Now, another example for normal wear and tear is faded paint. So let's say the walls, especially around door handles, light switches, you may typically see faded paint because the tenants may not have wiped the walls down. You cannot deduct from the tenant's security deposit for that. That's considered normal wear and tear. Here's something else that landlords absolutely cannot do when it comes to the security deposit. This actually should have been number 1 on the list, but landlords cannot commingle personal funds with the security deposit. You cannot do it. So when a tenant pays you their security deposit, don't put that into your personal bank account, because many areas do require the security deposit to be in an escrow account or in sometimes an interest-bearing account. So for instance, that means that if you are in a jurisdiction that require the security deposit to be in an interest-bearing account, it's going to collect interest for the duration of that tenancy. Okay. And when that tenant moves out, you are required to return that security deposit plus the interest in many areas. Okay, so please do not commingle funds. I know that landlords do it, but please, you have to understand that you cannot mix your security deposit with your personal funds or your business funds. Um, like I said, many jurisdictions do require that they be kept separate. Okay. And here's the third thing that landlords cannot do. And I know that some of you have done it, but you cannot delay returning that security deposit. If the law says that the security deposit must be returned in 30 days or 45 days, because most areas do have a timeline by which you must return a security deposit. Don't delay. All right. Please return a tenant's money because they may need it for their next rental property. All right. So those are just some things that you cannot do as a landlord. But now let me just also help you if you're a tenant and you're watching, or you know someone who's a tenant. Here's some things that tenants cannot do when it comes to the security deposit, because although you do have rights, I want you to know what you cannot do. Like I said before in the beginning, you cannot use the security deposit as your monthly rent. If you're running late, if you're out of funds, you cannot use that security deposit to pay the rent for that specific month. You cannot use the security deposit to pay your personal bills. That is not how it works. Okay? That's not how it works. And I've had some tenants who said, Karissa, listen, I'm running low on funds. I had an emergency. I just want to know if I can borrow some of my security deposit. You cannot do that. A landlord cannot go to the bank, withdraw any of that security deposit for any reason, not for their personal use or your personal use. So you absolutely cannot do that. It's not a loan where you can borrow and repay it. Okay, that's not what the security deposit is for. And so I do want you to know and understand that as a tenant, because there is a lot of uncertainty. There are some tenants who, like I said, believe that the security deposit is for them to feel safe and secure. That is not what the security deposit is for. So I do hope that something that I shared today was helpful. I did want to cover this because I've had a lot of questions about the security deposit. I know that this is a time of the year where a lot of people are moving. Now, I will say this as a tenant, if you are looking to move and maybe you need assistance finding security deposit assistance, Google resources in your rental community. There are a lot of agencies, there are a lot of jurisdictions that have put some sort of funding in place. Now, it may not be applicable everywhere, but there's no harm in asking and doing your research and looking for help. But there are a lot of places that will provide security deposit assistance. Maybe check your local government for any emergency rental assistance programs, because usually those programs will provide security deposit assistance. They'll help you with your first month's rent. They'll help you with your security deposit. And you'll just be surprised to learn what may be available. And if they don't know, if they don't have anything available, ask them if they know of any other places or resources that you could potentially get help paying that security deposit. But now, usually what happens is when you get assistance as a tenant, when you get assistance with your security deposit from some sort of agency or government, that money is not always returned to you. Sometimes the landlord is required by law to send that money back to the agency that may have paid on your behalf. So just ask those questions, know what you can do, know what you can't do. But that's the information that I wanted to share. And today I talked about the truth about security deposits, what it's for, tips for landlords, tips for tenants, and then things that you absolutely cannot do. So I'm going to do a quick recap. And if you have questions, comments, remarks, or observations pertaining to this subject matter, please go ahead and drop it in the comment section while I am live. So I shared 3 tips for tenants today. The first is to definitely inspect the property thoroughly, because that's going to be so important. You want to know and understand what the condition is. You want to get that in writing from the landlord. You should sign that move-in checklist as well as that landlord signing that move-in checklist. You want to maintain that rental property. You want to always report any issues, repairs, maintenance wise that's needed in the property so the landlord does not hold that against you. And then you also want to know and understand what the move out procedure is. At some point, I know that many of you are going to move out the property, so you should always know and understand what is required of you before that actually happened. So those were the 3 tips that I shared for tenants. The 3 tips that I shared for landlord today was same thing, document the property condition. Make sure that you understand as a landlord what the condition is before a tenant moves in, because a tenant cannot be held liable for something that was pre-existing when they moved in. You want to make sure that as a landlord, you are setting clear expectations, answering those questions, know what the laws are, which is the third point here, follow legal requirements. All right. Well, that's it. That's all I wanted to share today. My time is up. I thank you for yours. Listen, I hope that this was helpful for some of you. Please like, please tag, share it with someone else. Sharing is caring. If you have not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, please go over to that YouTube channel. Let me pull up my email address again for those of you who desire my email address. And let me just say thank you so much. My YouTube channel is popping, and a lot of you who have questions, you drop it in the comment section. I do follow up. I read the comments and I reply to the comments on my YouTube channel. So if you have not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, please go over to YouTube. There you can find me, Landlord Life with Karissa Spann. And I'm live on Facebook. I'm live. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm live. I'm on YouTube Mondays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Well, that's it. I hope that you have an amazing summer. I hope that you keep cool in all this heat. I look forward to you all joining me next week, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on this platform. Go share, share, share. Share this information because sharing is caring. I'm Karissa Spann, the abundantly blessed landlord and tenant expert. It's been a fantastic pleasure having you to join me today. Have a great evening. I'll see you all next week.